Hi Cheryl and everybody else watching. Today I wanted to do something a little different with this critique because it's such a great example, this little painting that Cheryl has done, of a lot of aspects that are really basic and are going to really help improve your paintings a lot in terms of their success as a painting and working with photos and making them work for you instead of against you. These are the kind of little video critiques that I do if you are interested in purchasing a personal tutor session. You can see it there on the website. It's an opportunity for you to work one-on-one with me on your painting, and we do it through these videos and other instructional materials, and we might do 5 or 6, however many that we need for you to finish your painting, and to do it in a more private setting if you don't want to put it out there on the critiques page, and also if you just want a little more in-depth help with your painting. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, so here's Cheryl's little painting. It's really nice. I love this photograph. I love the colors that are going on here. These warm golds and browns and the little figures in there. They really make for a lovely image. So the first thing that you're going to do when you have a photograph like this is you want to figure out what your composition is going to be, and in order to do that you have to figure out what are your main elements, what are most important, and then you want to place those elements on your page in a way that highlights them and keeps the eye moving around in your image. So obviously these trees are a major element, their color and their foliage, and the other major element, and really the focal point, is our little group of people walking down the street. Now what the first thing Cheryl was working with here is the fact that she's going from this square format into 9 by 12 kind of a format on her canvas. So she's going to have to move things around a little bit to start with. So one of the things that's important then in your painting is to figure out where you're going to put those different elements and where you're going to put that focal point. Now what I've put up here is what's called the rule of thirds. This kind of goes away and it's hard to see, but you see that how there are lines dividing this in thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and where these lines intersect, those are good areas to put a focal area. So the first thing that you want to try to avoid is putting a focal area this close to the edge, like you've got this little guy here. Whenever you put an image or a major element right on the edge of your painting, you're bringing the eye straight there. It's following this line of this curve. You see the guy and you just go right off. You don't pull the image, the viewer's eye, back into the painting. And you can do that in some different ways, but the first thing you want to do is move this little guy or this group so they're not on the edge of your painting but more in this area, which would be the thirds. Now how am I going to do that? Because how is that going to work? Well, I'll show you an example later and we'll talk about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the focal point is this tree that's going down here that you've added back in here. You've actually put right in a focal point area, and it's a very strong element. It's straight. It almost looks like it's not as natural, and it's not important to the image. It's like adding an extra character in a story that doesn't advance the storyline and has no relationship to the characters that you have in there. So if I were doing this, I would not put that tree in there at all, and instead I would move my little focal guys here over into that focal point area. So that's the major thing, and then I would play up the lights and darks here, and these forms that the tree is taking that are really interesting, the way the branches go up. So how would I do that? Now, the next thing you think about after you think about where to place your focal point and what things to leave out is you're going to think about values. So here I've taken those images and I've reduced them to black and white. And what this does is show you the differences between the different areas. So for example, you can see that in your image, you have the darks and the lights kind of bouncing all over your image without defining any areas clearly. You can't really tell what's there based on the black and white image. So instead, you want to really focus on things like, here is the value of that tree. You see how dark that color is? And you can see it over here in this little square. Now, if I look at the values of your tree, you see how light it is in comparison? There's your tree trunks, and here's those tree trunks. Do you see how much darker those tree trunks really are? And if you make them darker like that, then they stand out against this foliage. Excuse me. So here's the foliage in the tree. It's this value, so it's in this range. And here's your foliage. You see how you have a lot of lighter colors and darker colors, and it's bouncing all over in the spectrum of light to dark. So your foliage doesn't stand out as an element separate from your trees. Instead, the eye kind of gets lost and doesn't know what is trunk and what is tree. You've also kind of lost these wonderful arcs that kind of frame our guys. See how they kind of hug the image of the guys over there, and instead you've made yours straight and vertical instead of having these nice sweeps of, let me get a color that you can see. You can see how you have these nice sweeps of these trees, and that kind of encompasses our focal point, leads the eye to the focal point over here, which was, we would move over into this area. So you want to really focus on those lights and darks before you even get started in much else. Also, look at how light your light area is back here, and then that light area being this light, this gives us a wonderful contrast with this figure. Do you see how dark that figure is? And that makes him really stand out. Whereas you have your figure the same values as the area around it, and so it doesn't stand out, and it doesn't read as such. So those are some ideas. Those values, first your composition, then your values, blocking your values. So I just did a little playing around with what I might have done with this image if I were doing it in Photoshop. So what have I done here? What I did again was I'm using your 9x12 area, but I've taken these guys that were over here in this image, I've enlarged them a little bit, and I've just moved them clear over here into this focal area so that we could see them, and I've put them in this area so that they're in that rule of thirds area and make a better focal point. So now your eye comes up the pathway and it sees these guys and it follows up. You notice how he's still a dark image, and then I've created more light background behind him so that he stands out dark against light, and then we really can see him. And then I've just taken this kind of a side to the walkway, and I've added one here in perspective, having it widening out. I've added some shadow area under the tree, but left them in sunlight. So they're in sunlight, and then we've got some shadow here, and then the tree is just the same. It has these lovely arching forms that then kind of frame our guys and make for an interesting composition. And instead of having it be a street scene, I just took these same colors and shapes that are on this side and put them on that side. So those are just the kind of things that it's fun to do in terms of moving your photo around, using the elements in the photo, editing out what you don't need. We edited out this extra tree that was in here. we edited out a lot of this in between area in order to move our guy over and enlarge him. Another thing I want to touch on just real quickly, since I have a little more time, is your color harmonies. So this is like a warm scene with these warm golds and browns and colors like that. So you want to be careful. Obviously, we talked about how this part of your tree branches is too light to stand out against what's going on. So if that's instead these dark colors, like, and you have these the branches forming over our image like that, then they're going to stand out a lot more against the light, and they're going to stay in shadow. It's very important that when you have an area like this that's in shadow, this, it's not a very bright day, but this area is in shadow and there's sunlight back here. So you have to keep this area that's in shadow dark. Everything in the shadow has to stay darker than everything in the light. So for example, you have some of these foliage on this tree in these light colors versus these dark colors here. You can see here's the dark values of the foliage here, and then you're pulling in these lighter colors. You see the difference? So that pops it out of the shadow. Now all of a sudden you don't know, is this tree in shadow or is this tree in light? Having a more simplified light and shadow pattern is more understandable for the eye, and you can see the light better. I get the concept that you're putting some dappled light on here, but it becomes a little confusing as to where is the light source, where is this dappled light coming from. Simple is better, editing is better. Obviously these are all things that are going to be your choice and what you're doing in terms of what your eye sees and what you liked about this image and what impressed you and moved you about the image. Instead I've added a little bit of shadow here with a little bit of dappled light because there's so much going on already with the change in colors and values going on here, and then these figures. I just wanted to touch really quickly on almost out of time, but be careful when you're doing a figure. Let me bring the color one back. Be careful when you're putting an image in with a blue shirt and brown pants, for example, that you're getting this concept of shadow and light. So you're not going to see all blue on the shirt and all brown on the pants. If you look at the image here, these could be brown pants, but they're going to have a lot of dark grayish colors and then lighter colors that are over the whole image. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you really study those figures and study what's making up what there are, you'll see that they're not all one color and all another color, but it's the darkness and the light. See how light this area is where the sun's hitting him, how light his head is, versus much darker over here and much darker in here versus this light. So simplify, integrate your colors, and you'll have a great time. Anyway, so I just wanted to do this as an example of the way that I like to do these little personal tutors, and you can find it on the website on the home page if you're interested in those. And great job you're doing here with this one, Cheryl. Keep up the good work. I'm really looking forward to seeing your updates, and thank you so much for posting, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.